Ted, once again, you've defeated my battle familiar.
So, you want to master the art of battle familiars, do you?
Oh, yes. Oh, wise battle familiar master, teach me the ways.
Well, the first rule of Conjuration Wizard Fight Club is you don't talk about Conjuration Wizard Fight Club.
Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerdarchy Steve, and as usual, I'm hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted.
Hey, if you want to continue to summon D&D content to your YouTube feed, make sure you hit that subscribe button.
Make it an at-will ability if you get that notification bell.
We're going to jump into our Conjuration Wizard Fight Club video. It's just a goofy idea we came up with when we did our familiar spell discussion a little while back.
Now, we will put out there as this disclaimer that Nerdarchy does not advocate, condone, endorse in any way, shape, or form any amount of animal violence.
Or cruelty, real or imagined.
As we all know, a familiar is a magically summoned creature, and you can always recast your spell and the thing comes back. So, we look to things like, Pokemon and like that to say, all right, how could we recreate this in D&D?
Well, I know one of the ways we could create this or recreate this and make it so much better, and that's if we had more familiars.
Maybe we should check in with our sponsor for this particular video, Stibble's Codex of Companions, where you can get access to over 70 new wizard familiars by checking the link in the description and check out that Kickstarter. But that's not enough. The book is going to have so much more. There are feats, there are spells, and there is a loyalty-based system to be able to improve the bond and make your familiars that much better.
It is already funded, and the link is down in the description. And that Kickstarter is by our friend and fellow YouTuber Logan from RuneSmith. So go check it out and show him some love. Now on to the goofiness that is our Conjuration Wizard Fight Club. Now you could do this with any wizard, but so the problem is that familiars really only have like one hit point. They also can't actually attack things, technically. We are going to get rid of Raw a little bit, and this would be completely homebrew anyway. And the idea, there is a club, there is a place where wizards meet, and they let their familiars do battle. So we want to come up with the rules and what that might look like. And also it would be a much more entertaining and fun battle if there were conjuration wizards of at least 14th level.
The reason why we want to use 14th level wizards, conjuration wizards, is because they have several things that are going to go in there. Number one, 6th level, you get Benign Transposition. You can use your action to teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space that you can see. Alternatively, you can choose a space within range occupied by a small or medium creature. If that creature is willing, you both teleport, swapping places. So you could have a little bit of fun with this one with, another creature. But durable summons is the thing that Dave was talking about. At 14th level, any creature that you summon or create with a conjuration spell has 30 temporary hit points. So if normally familiars have 1 hit point
to 3,
1 to 3 hit points, and you give them 30 temporary, they are ridiculously more powerful than their counterparts.
Now, that being said, a warlock, or anyone really that kind of finds some of those special familiars, Gazer, Pseudo-Dragon, Imp, Quasit.
Sprite.
Nope, you can't find that one.
That's
you have to be a warlock to get that one. But the other 4 you can find and then combined with, they will have a little bit more hit points. So you'd be able to get a little bit better, but they don't have 30 hit points better. So if you had 14 levels of conjuration and maybe a 3rd level warlock, Pack of the Chains would be the optimal best Conjuration Wizard Fight Club contender of all time, because you'd start off with more hit points because you could have one of those better familiars, and then you can stack 30 hit points on it as well. But there's definitely some other things. So there's things we can do with a familiar. One of them is we can cast touch spells through them. So really the wizard could be actually more active in being part of this. So also let's we do have some rules written down. We might have to refer to our notes for these.
And I will say that you might have heard rules like this or similar to it somewhere else before.
So all right, so the rules of Familiar Battle Fight Club. Don't talk about it. Also, don't talk about it. Someone yells stops, goes limp, taps out, the fight is over. Only 2 familiars to a fight. 1 fight at a time. No shirts, no shoes. I think this isn't for the familiars. This is for the wizards. Fights will go on as long as they have to. If this is your first night at Familiar Battle Fight Club, you have to fight.
So like I said, you might have seen rules like this somewhere before. I'm not going to make any, specific mentions, but, it's not unique.
We don't talk about it. That's the thing. We do not talk about it. Here's you said benign transposition. One of the fun things about that, say you cast Flock of Familiars, so you have several familiars on hand. And
all of which have the 30 temporary hit points.
You could then use that ability to swap out your familiars and keep the battle going. Now, if you're both Conjuration wizards, you could both do this and make it more interesting. But I also feel like we could also have different types of fights as well.
There's a lot of things to look at, and I guess that kind of comes into what are the participation rules of it?
All right, you have the hype, right? Before the fight starts, the weighing off and the kind of squaring off of the familiars probably takes about 3 rounds, which the wizards can cast any spells they want to affect the terrain, which the terrain is probably just a big table that they fight on, made into a ring. They could also cast spells on their familiars. Now, this being 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, you're kind of limited by concentration, so there's only so many spells that you could do. I would say that would be a fun thing to do. So each wizard, this is where they can kind of strategize and figure out how they're going to make their familiar a little bit tougher.
And you could even do it as a kind of reactionary. You would still have initiative order. So it's okay, you cast your spell on your familiar. I, as the opposing wizard, I've seen what you've just done. So now I would be able to have essentially a reciprocal effect of, can I cast something that's going to counter what you're doing? Do I remove the spell that you've just done? However you want to look at it. But again, it's going to go into, what are the preset rules of engagement here? But you each have 3 rounds to set up, prep.
Hype. We're going the hype rounds.
The hype rounds. There you go. And then the fight begins.
Now the fight begins. Your familiars roll initiative. Your wizards roll initiative. And as they begin battling, once per round, I think the wizards are able to interact with their familiar. It would be illegal to interact with your opponent's familiar.
Okay.
But you can interact with your familiar directly or allow it to deliver one of your touch spells.
So that definitely makes it far deadlier, because if you can do these kinds of things, that's gonna seriously ramp up how much damage you've got the familiar to output.
I know, but also you might counterspell each other as well as wizards, so that's a possibility too.
Well, when you are talking about high-level wizards, counterspell is going to be a thing in question, and all right, I counterspell yours, you counterspell my counterspell. All right, you both used our reactions, therefore you're going to have to let anything I do go. So it has that kind of a touch and go aspect to it.
So, and then the familiars fight until one is dismissed, has been defeated, runs away, whatever. And so that would essentially be the rules. I could see gambling halls, building up around these being kind of big events for wizards. Maybe at wizard festivals, this is something that takes place.
Well, I mean, and you could even have a thing where, there is places. There are not places as in a location, but first, second, third place, and whoever's big dog on campus, so to speak, it's going to be known. So when that familiar comes, walking around with their wizard, there's going to be some swagger to it. That's going to be a well-known familiar.
So the question is, though, who gets the props? Who is well-known? Who is the celebrity? Is it the familiar? Or is it the wizard?
I think it's a combination.
Is it a team?
I think it's got to be a team. I mean, when we look at professional, athletes these days, it's the boxer who's doing the performing, if you will, the competition. But when you watch movies about boxing, Rocky or Creed or what have you, the trainer is kind of equally important because they've got all of this, presets that are there. So I would think that the wizard who kind of owns the familiar is gonna get some clout as well.
I don't know. I feel like the really serious fan it would be like that, but more of the casual fan would just know the familiar.
Yeah, okay.
But the question is, do Rangers and Druids start showing up to protest?
Well, I mean, again, that kind of goes into, that disclaimer that we mentioned, that they are magically summoned creatures, and therefore no real harm is being done.
It doesn't mean they don't have feelings. They are kind of being exploited. So I could definitely see maybe some of the Druid circles showing up and protesting.
Well, I mean, that could be, part of the adventure, itself. Like, do you have to contend with a fellow caster or, a series of druids, rangers, and their animal companions who are set upon, this must come down, this is not just, this is not fair. You can have a lot of fun with it. I mean, it's great to have a location where fun things can happen. When you talk about the competitions, the hype, the after parties, the gambling, and then all of the different layers of interaction between NPCs, fellow PCs, and what have you. There's a lot of story arcs and story hooks that could be built in and around this.
Now, I also see this would probably be like more popular in some place where run by a mageocracy, where magic is much more accepted, is much more common. So you do have some high-level casters. I mean, on the early levels, it's going to be really hard to get fun fights because the familiars die so easily.
Whoever is first.
But there are things like Aid that raises their temporary hit points, or not their temporary, their maximum hit points. That would also stack with the temporary hit points. There are other spells that give you temporary hit points. So, like, if you're not a Conjuration wizard, you might have a way to kind of make your familiar a contender. We also talked about the warlocks that can get the special familiars. They can get the gazer, pseudo dragon, imp, quasit, as well as a sprite. I don't see the sprite doing very well. Heart sense, or whatever their ability is.
I don't know. My money would be on the pseudo dragon or the gazer.
Oh really? I don't know, man. Imps and quasits, they have poison. They've got multiple attacks. They have some shape shifting ability.
Pseudo dragon's got some pretty nifty abilities as well. So.
Yeah, but imp can turn invisible at will. You put out your imp as a rat or as a spider, and you think that's what you're fighting, but it's actually an imp.
That's true.
And then boom, they shape change into their natural form. And the stinger comes out. It could it could be brutal. What about cheating? What would cheating look like? We could have hidden spellcasters in the crowd. Either doing things, trying to manipulate the fight.
There's always going to be that, no matter what you're looking at, whether it be, the actual contestants themselves or outside influences. So that kind of comes into, a whole new layer of, if this is really powerful wizards who are setting this up, is there circles of magic so that, all right, inside is where the contestants are. And then in the secondary ring are the casters. Outside of that, there is a ring of anti-magic to kind of prevent, outside magic within. Now, maybe if you're found cheating, maybe there's severe repercussions. Are there, are you pulled from Conjuration Wizard Fight Club? Are you, are you literally attacked by the other mages? I mean, we're talking about seriously powerful stuff. I mean, they can modify memory. They can do all kinds of stuff.
What about magic items? Are familiars able to be equipped with magic items? Amulet of Health, for instance, would be super useful.
I mean, there's so many things that you could wind up doing, and this would open up the avenue into a whole series of magic items, that, would be specific to familiars. Maybe the wizard equips something, and then when they cast Find Familiar, it bestows extra benefits to said familiar.
All possibilities. I could definitely see a fun campaign springing up around this. Whether you're part of the entourage of a famous celebrity familiar and their wizard sidekick, or you're actually looking to be a contender and like you're training your familiar. Very Pokemon-ish montages going on in my head right now.
I'm seeing some kid who's the apprentice to Vortax's owner, and somebody comes up because they happen to know of this weird connection. It's like, oh my god, you're the just totally cartoon style, ridiculous animation.
Well, to me, it'd be funny. Like I'm envisioning that same apprentice being kind of like bullied and and ordered around by the familiar.
By the familiar. Well, that is
Apprenticing ain't easy.
that is kind of ridiculous.
So a whole like cottage industry could just like spring up around the concept of these fights and battles. Like, do you have the ye old fantasy version of the cut man for, you know, medical attention to the familiar? I mean, granted, you can just recast it and they get all their hit points back, but do they deal with it that way, or they treat them, you know, more like a living thing? You know, is a lot of time spent researching your opponent and their familiar. That, you know, so there's a lot of things that could go into it. Like, the players should be hired almost like private investigators to dig up dirt and information about, you know, the arrival.
Yeah, and you know, you could okay, well, this competitor over here, he normally summons his spider that's got, you know, this modification, what have you. You know, it's more like Shelob. It's a spider, but it's got a poisonous stinger tail. You know, okay, all right, well, that means, great, you did your research, that's what my opponent is. I'm gonna summon this thing that's immune to poison. Great. And they come in with something different, you know, that could definitely influence the fight, you know, greatly.
Now, could you expand out from this and have other kinds of events where, you know, steel defenders square off of each other? It's not like a huge big deal because you can repair them and fix them, and they're not really living creatures, they're constructs.
But your ranger animal companion is another story.
That is another story. That is a living creature, and you know, you can replace it, but you're literally replacing it with a new creature. It dies. It is not a spirit like the familiar, unless you're using some of the UA rules for the revised Ranger and some other things that came out. But out of the PHB, out of Raw, the way it is like, no, you're just literally having a cockfight with two living creatures, or you know, a dogfight or whatever. Not cool. Even in a fantasy world.
Even in a fantasy world, not cool.
So, yeah, so which would have completely different implications. So there are definitely different things that you could look at and expand upon. Like, maybe there's special events that could happen, and then you could deal with the moral quandaries of right and wrong. You know, should this be allowed to happen? As the players, what do you do? Things are being harmed and being forced to do things against their will. So, like, that could all in itself could lead down a whole different road of adventure.
If you want more D&D familiars in your life, we just did a video on getting the most out of your D&D familiar right here.
If you want something nearly as exclusive as Battle Familiar Fights, there is always our patron-only live chats.
Not only do we create monthly 5e content for players and DMs alike, but we also do monthly giveaways, and our patrons are automatically entered.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.